Hello, good afternoon. Let me just introduce the panel. We have Chris Collins here on my left, who is Senior Development and Production Executive for BFI. We have Karina Fake next to him, who is a writer-director of the film The Beast, which is one of the BFI Shorts 2012. Then we have Nikki Bentham, who is a producer and executive producer of the BFI Shorts 2012. And finally, we have Matt Wilkinson, who is a producer of SLR, which is one of the films in Shorts 2012. So a mix of funders, producers, and filmmakers. I'm going to start off with you, Chris. If you could talk a little bit about the reasons behind developing this scheme in the first place.
Okay. Why we do the scheme? Well, we like short films. We think short films are really valuable as part of the overall development process for filmmakers. It's almost the only thing they can do where they can really the directors can really establish their signature without any constraints from the financiers. It's really about what they want to say about the world and how they want to say it. And you can't really get that freedom to do that in any other medium. You can't really do it in television in the same way. You can't do it quite in the theatre. You can't do it in whatever the other the areas that people come from to become directors. So, we see short films as a really invaluable part of development, talent development in general. And you might remember an organisation called the UK Film Council, which sadly was closed down about 2 years ago. All of the short film schemes that were being run by the UK Film Council had come to a sort of natural end. The whole map of funding changed. The regional screen agencies who had making a lot of quite low budget shorts all closed down. So there was been a bit of a gap. And then when we had a sort of green light to... It's got very close, isn't it? Oh, you can still see me. So when we got the kind of green light to be able to sort of think, well, actually, what do we do? How do we intervene? Who best needs significant intervention at this point? What do we do? And it kind of occurred to me that actually there's a lot of people who've made some short films and done other stuff and working in other areas who were really kind of at that point where a significantly resourced opportunity to really show their strengths as directors in order to really show that maybe they are ready to do a feature film was long overdue. And there had been one scheme that had been previously run, you might remember, called Cinema Extreme, which was sort of around the same budget level, and was run by the UK Film Council for very successfully, but it was very skewed in a very particular kind of filmmaking, and we wanted to really make this broad, so that we wanted to make comedies could really have a go at it, and show that they've got the chops to make it. You'd understand what the feature film they were going to make from the short film that they had made. So that was the sort of thinking behind it. So we sort of took sort of near £1 million out of the pot and said, well, let's see how many we can do, and we ended up funding 17s. Yeah, we shot about 6. Well, Nikki can talk about that. And I actually think it was a really good thing to do. I think going forwards, we need to look at a whole kind of a different way of making sure that there are opportunities at lots of different levels. So both at very entry level and a mid-range and this higher level, maybe even higher level. If you've got a really ambitious filmmaker who's 150,000 to make a short film, why not? So we're going to look at making those opportunities wider, more flexible going forward. And going forward, we won't perhaps operate quite in the way that this sort of really big, broad scheme did. Be a slightly more bespoke approach, and it will be through the new talent centres that we're going to establish in the regions sometime this year as part of the Film Forever plan. So, be a slightly different approach to it, but there will be lots of opportunities to make short films, and we just believe that they are a really, really, really valuable thing to do.
Could you just talk a little bit more about how, when the talent had obviously put their proposals in, how you went about picking people? Because you had an enormous amount of entry?
We did. Well, obviously, what we we knew there'd be a lot of people apply. So what we did, we tendered for a company to manage the scheme. So we got a lot of applications for that actually for very experienced people. We chose a company called Lighthouse, based in Brighton, run by Emily Kyriakides, who has got great experience with Guiding Lights and other short film schemes that they've done. She hooked up with Nikki and others and put a really good team together. And basically, they handled the kind of administration of it. Did a really good job in terms of mapping out when they come in and really investigating on the first pass in terms of the director's talent, right scripts, any other elements that come in. So we had a kind of a really concise way of filtering down to a manageable number. At which point, the sort of editorial team of BFI got involved.
So Nikki, maybe can move on to you a little bit with that. Sorry, can everybody hear me? Is this loud enough? Yeah, if you could talk a bit about how the selection process, because I assume that sometimes you're looking at, obviously the script's the thing, but the writers, directors, who they've paired up with already, whether you think the talent's going to work together.
We weren't especially worried about the teams at the initial stage. We were mostly looking for, because this was very specific in terms of the filmmakers that it was trying to attract. So we kind of started by just checking eligibility, obviously, because it was quite sort of a high threshold, and we were looking for people that had sort of a track record, and it was different for the different disciplines, but in most cases it was filmmakers with sort of at least 2 examples of outstanding work. So we sort of started by making sure that the applications were eligible, and then from that point sort of reading through applications, which we were looking at the sort of strength and the kind of creative merit of the stories and the concepts, but also looking at how that fits and how this short film is going to fit into the longer term career ambitions of that filmmaker, because it was very important that we were targeting people on the cusp of making that transition into features. So we really wanted to see that there was kind of a clear reasoning for why this film was sort of going to make all the difference, and why this film had to be made in order to sort of unlock those sort of certain next steps, whether it's sort of finance or contacts or experimenting with a different genre or proving themselves in some way. And of course, at that point, we also had a team of readers reading the scripts.
And you don't have some of their names, but what type of people were they? The readers, were they producers or
no? There were
script editors.
There was sort of a combination really of some people that we'd met through the BFI, and some people that Lighthouse had working with them on the number of other schemes that they run as well, and there are a couple of script editors involved in there as well, so we were sort of having the scripts read, and at the same time we were also watching the material. So it was kind of a gradual process of whittling this list down, but everything was looked at and assessed at least one level, and then sort of certain things went into the next round until we got to a number that we sort of presented to the BFI and worked through with Chris and the team there.
Were there any particular genres that stood out, or if you had that many applications that people were particularly choosing to write in?
There was a lot of dystopian future stuff, a lot of slightly scary future world stories.
Did you pick any of those?
We have got. No, I didn't. We've got one sci-fi, but I wouldn't say it's in that sort of bleak.
No.
We did have quite a lot of bleak futures.
Well, actually, there's another one. The Lions is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So there's one or two.
Yeah.
So were you quite careful to have a mix of genres.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We were sort of also, once we kind of got down to a sort of a long list really, then we kind of started looking, you know, we could sort of see certain trends, and then we started looking at the diversity, and I mean we didn't have anything in mind in terms of quotas of, you know, we need to have an X amount of dramas or comedies or anything. We just wanted to make sure that there was sort of a good range of voices and genres represented, and I think that we sort of fairly naturally got there, really.
Yeah, I think it's one thing I'm always aware of it, you know, how much everybody else is, but you know, particularly in this kind of thing, and it's just, in a way, it's a perennial strength and a problem with British cinema is that lots of very tough drama tends to rise to the top because it's powerful, and yet you know, it's not necessarily the kind of thing people rush out to the cinema to see. So you know, you have to be very careful, I think, not to over-respond to that material. And I think we did want to sort of skew it a little bit towards maybe you know, directors who might be, you know, moving towards more sort of broader audience material than that. So, you know, if anything informed the choices, I think that did a little bit. You know, definitely looking for invention and something different.
Yeah, and I think, because we did have sort of one eye on the feature film career of those filmmakers, so we were kind of constantly asking ourselves what sort of short film, what sort of filmmaker is this, what sort of feature film is this person going to make, and who's going to go and see it. So that kind of helped inform the decision as well.
I think on that note, it's probably quite interesting to turn to the filmmakers. Corinne, maybe I can start with you, because I know we're going to see a clip from your film.
Yeah.
And with this, with your film's called The Beast, did you already have the idea for this short film, or did you hear this scheme was happening and you decided to write something for the brief, or knowing what the budget could be?
No, I'd had the idea for quite a few years, bubbling away, but hadn't, for various reasons, been making shorts for a bit. And I had probably about 5 ideas, and I chose that one because it kind of fitted the brief in terms of relating to my past shorts and where I'd like to go, but also because it was probably the only one that was honestly connected to me and I thought would stand a better chance in that way.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll watch
About the
clip?
project,
Yeah.
It's a film about a young girl. It's kind of a coming-of-age story, I suppose, with a thriller, horror edge. And it's about a young girl of 10 who has a rich inner fantasy life, which we see, in which a princess-type character is locked in a battle with a beast. We never actually, or the princess never sees the beast, and the question in the little girl's mind is what the beast is and what it looks like. And the clip that you're going to see, the picture's all finished, but the sound work is only just beginning, so that's a bit rough. It's an unfinished film. Yeah, sorry, I should have said the voiceover is actually mine, and it will be the actress's, which sounds a bit weird. I haven't done that yet.
It looks great. What's the budget for that?
It was 43. Yeah. Yeah.
So I assume that, I mean, that you wouldn't normally be thinking about having a budget of 43,000 for a short that you were going to make.
No, well, I had thought about it before, I just hadn't got it.
Fantasised about it.
Yeah.
But I know you've had other films, you've been through public funded schemes before for other films, so you're sort of used to working in that way.
Yes.
How is this compared? You can be honest.
This has been very smooth. No, actually, in terms of the mechanisms, the selection, and working with the execs afterwards, all my experiences with public financing has been good. And
taking people's
quite
notes
easy.
and
Yeah, well, I've got a background of factual TV, and I've had a lot harder experiences than that. I think it's quite a supportive environment to be working in lots of ways.
And has it made the work better, do you think?
Was what made the work better?
But other people's opinions being
Oh,
fed
yeah.
into the process?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
And
that's
Nikki,
very important. I think.
I'd be interested to know why this project, why did you pick this project, and why Karina as a writer-director?
Well, we were really impressed by her previous work, and also by this particular story, which had lots of really nice, interesting hooks that sort of kept us reading and kept kind of taking. We felt it could take the audience on this sort of adventure that's in the girl's head, but it turns out to be something darker than just her imagination, or is it? And then also, when we met Karina to talk about it, it was clear that it was something, a step that she needed in order to sort of progress to the feature films that she was looking to make, which had a bit more of that sort of thriller genre spin, but which she hadn't had an opportunity to play with in her previous work. So it seemed like she really fitted what we were looking for, and we all liked her work and this script. So.
And did you, at what stage did you then get filmmakers in, before you picked the projects, but get the filmmakers in to discuss their kind of career aspirations, I guess?
Well, we probably shortlisted down to about 40 projects that we interviewed. So we interviewed those. Some were kind of individual filmmakers, some already had teams attached. And then from the 40, we took 28 through to a development round, which basically consisted of a workshop, a kind of group workshop, and then it was sort of tailored development strategies for each project. Some of them were then assigned a script editor to do a bit more work with. Some needed kind of different things.
And this script changed a lot, didn't it?
Yes, yeah, it did.
From the application to this, the development weekend was really important.
Yeah. And then at that point, all the projects had to kind of resubmit their scripts as well as kind of visual materials. And also during that process, we were kind of finding potential partners for the people that didn't have teams yet. And so by the end of that process, we selected the 17.
And Karina, if you had gone through, you were saying the script changed a lot.
Mm.
If you'd gone through that process and not ended up being picked, would you have found a way to make this? Would you have had ideas about how to go and find other funding for it?
To be perfectly honest, I wouldn't at this level, no, because of...
You kind of needed this amount of
Yeah,
money.
I personally do. I know some people, I think, some people are better positioned and might have different experience of the film world, but mine is fairly new and quite specific, and I wouldn't have known what to do otherwise.
Matt, can we come to you, please?
Yes, absolutely.
If you could talk a little bit about your role in your project and the film itself. just
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
contextualise that.
The film itself is called SLR, and it's a suburban thriller. It's quite dark subject matter. It's about a middle-aged man who engages a lot with voyeur pornography. I don't know how many people here know what voyeur pornography is, but it's relatively tame in terms of online pornography. But where the thrill, I guess, comes from is the girls on there don't know they're being photographed. So there's a guy who looks at images of women who don't realise that they're having their picture taken in certain suggestive but quite kind of tame scenarios. And he's online during one of his sessions, and he sees a photograph of his teenage daughter on there. And it's kind of how this underground world that he partakes in clashes with his private life. And he actually sets out to track down the photographer of the girl not quite knowing what he hopes to achieve, but somehow possibly there's catharsis here, or possibly who knows. So it's a very tense suburban thriller. What excited me about it when I was shown the project was the ambition of trying to make a genre movie, but in 15 or 20 minutes. Whether that was possible, whether you could really get to the point where the story engine is racing and you get the genuine thrills that you might get watching a kind of feature-length version of this kind of story. So, Nikki was talking a little bit about the shortlisting process. I actually I did apply with projects that didn't get selected, but I wasn't part of the original application with my writer-director Stephen Fingleton's project to begin with, so I wasn't part of the first 40 where the talent kind of came and spoke about their projects. But as Nikki was saying there, some of these projects weren't fully packaged, and actually they were attracted, I believe, to writers and director packages, partly because they were on the transition to feature film, as mentioned, also partly because these were interesting scripts, good projects. And then I think the plan was for those talent to then be matched with producers who they felt would work well together. And it was believed that this kind of subject matter was right for me, and this director was a good fit for me. And indeed, we got on really well, and it's been a good process ever since.
So that's actually been a great way of connecting people.
Yeah. You actually knew each other before?
We did. We knew each other. We knew each other probably in a kind of networking capacity. We'd met a couple of times. Stephen had come in. I used to be a development executive, and Stephen had come in as a writer-director talent and had pitched to me before, but we'd never quite found the right thing to do together. And this felt like a good project to be involved in. So.
And could you talk a bit about, because I know you've worked on projects that have been privately financed.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. Previous to that, I'd produced a short film called Worm, about a talking worm. And I'd attempted to get that project off the ground for quite a while, and at the time we first started packaging that project and looking into finance, there were quite a lot of schemes that could have got involved with this project, and for various different reasons it didn't quite happen, but it got to the point where we knew this was going to be an expensive short. We probably, even if we qualified for the top end schemes, we wouldn't quite get the budget we required, and I just wanted to start relationships as well with private investors and to see how all of that worked. And a friend of mine at the time was working for an intermediary company who had a roster of high net worth individuals who routinely invested in features for various reasons, partly for tax reasons, but also because they were passionate about cinema. And I was just hopeful that, let's say there's 1,000 people on that list, I was hopeful that maybe one of them might also be a patron of the arts, for want of a better word, and might have significant private equity to want to support the directors who I was working with and me as a burgeoning producer to help us get the film made. And we sent a package out to about 5 different investors. We met with 3, and one guy came along and said, "I like your project. I know this doesn't often happen, I'm sorry. I'd like to invest in you." And he was great throughout the entire process. So kind of lucky, but with a bit of research thrown into the mix. So.
And did he then sort of leave you to your own devices, or were there strings attached?
Yeah, it was odd. It was kind of what you would hope it to be. He'd never been on a film set before, so one of the stipulations was that he would come to our film set, and I was very nervous about this because obviously it's not going to be a 100-man crew, Pinewood Studios and all the rest of it. But we did. We had a relatively large crew. We had a 40-man crew, and because we weren't quite sure how we were going to do the talking worm, we ended up with an SFX department who built a prosthetic worm that was radio controlled, and the day he came to set, we'd had a set built and we had the puppeteers radio controlling the worm. So he came along and he was like, "Great, this is the magic of movie making." So all of that really helped him engage in the process, but he was very hands-off until the point where he paid for our screening. So it's a good way to end it. But yeah.
So this is the first project that you've been publicly funded?
Yes, it's probably not the first time I've qualified for some element of funding, but it's the first time that public money's paid for the entire project. Yeah.
So how have you found the process?
Actually, not dissimilar to the process where the cheque was written, quite hands-off in terms of. We had the process in Brighton, which Nikki talked about, where we very much scrutinised the project. So it was about getting the scripts right, and that was absolutely there. And then we had feedback on the budget, and people, we showed our XOD lists, and so there was an involvement, but there wasn't an intrusion.
You didn't have time to intrude.
You didn't have time to intrude. We got started too quickly. So
But you haven't finished.
we haven't finished, but we're probably going to deliver end of February, I think. So we're getting to the end of it now. But no, it's kind of. I don't know if this is a typical scenario, but there when we needed advice, but also left us alone when we needed just to get our heads around various things. So it's been good.
I would like to open this up because I'm aware that people might have specific questions. I have many, but we'll come back to them. Yes, just here.
I was wondering, you just talked about private investment.
Yes.
I was just wondering, I don't know if
I don't think that's one.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, that's it. The outcome after the film's made.
Yes.
For example, if the BFI is investing in you, they're going to make sure you get lots of publicity. They're going to make sure press is on it. And
I'll find out.
and I just wondered how it was affected by private investment, because you don't really get.
I think an investment is a bit of a phony word, certainly for a project of this scale. Our investor wasn't really putting the money up because he hoped to see a return, because the budget was too large. And I know there are ways to monetize short films. There are international sales agents now. You might sell your film on iTunes, and there are probably more revenue streams beside. But for a short film, we were never going to recoup the production costs, so this was never going to go into profit. Sorry.
I think I meant more publicity-wise.
Oh, how did we? We just had an agreement with our investor that we would attempt to get the film out there on the festival circuit primarily. So it was more about creating a film that we were all proud of, and then seeing it kind of do the tour of the festivals around the world. That was the hope. It wasn't really about. Am I answering the question? Publicity in what sense?
But basically, you've done that yourself.
No, I didn't ask for more funds from him to publicise it, or we built a website, but we didn't really. There wasn't like a PR machine behind this short. If that's the question.
So it was more about the making of.
It's more about the making, and we made a documentary of making the film, and that all went on a website, and. It was, but we didn't have a lot of spend in terms of then publicising this film as a short.
Any other questions? Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Where will these films be seen, and what are your plans for the next stage of your career? Have you sort of thought that far ahead?
In terms of where the films are going to be seen, it's probably. There isn't necessarily one answer for all of them. Because there's 17, there's kind of a few too many to kind of probably put into one showcase. And they're all very different, finishing at different times, and also because the scheme's really around the filmmakers' needs and how these short films can best serve them in their career. They've all got slightly different requirements and preferences, and I suppose some of them, want to get into Cannes, and that's what they're kind of headed for, and we'll sort of support them and do whatever we can to kind of help them on that road. But then some of them, I think, like when we first met with Stephen and Matt, Stephen sort of said, I've done the festival thing, and the most important thing for me is to get this film onto Vimeo so I can show all the financiers in the US who I'm talking to about this feature, that, so I can show them that I can do this. And that's not something that we'd, if a digital platform or any kind of, unconventional route for them was the best way to go, then that's what we support. But But yeah, so I guess there isn't really a singular plan for them. They've all got slightly different.
So are we likely to see them? I mean, could they be sold to television, for example? Or might a distributor pick them up and put them in the cinema, or is that being a bit old-fashioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of that's tough these days, but it does happen. I mean, essentially, it's kind of in the hands of the filmmaking teams to push the project out there and in whichever direction they want to go, and we'll sort of help them however we can in doing that. And I think we might, I guess we'll see sort of how they all turn out and whether there is sort of an appropriate way to kind of screen some of them or release some of them or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they all have different paths, but actually people should be able to see them. They may not see them. The whole festival really takes 6 months to a year for it to play out. After that point, we definitely want to make them available somehow. So one of the things we're working on is a website which will be for sort of new talent, emerging talent, and we will definitely want to be able to showcase work on that. So there's no reason why we should be able to feature one every month, for instance, to show the kind of things we've made, and that would be very accessible to anyone in the UK. So that would definitely feature. And it could be one of the places one might see.
And the next stage of the career?
Well, I'm approaching it on two fronts really, as a writer and a director. I'm already writing other things, and the next stage is to try and get a feature off the ground. So I've got a feature project that I might try and resurrect with this, and then I need to develop some directly off the back of this. So, thank you. Matt? Sure.
Yeah, sorry. Features, very much so. Got a couple of projects that are developed and packaged, so now it's the raising the finance stage, but it's kind of a different beast, financing features, obviously, so that's kind of what I'm on the learning curve of now.
I do think it's quite interesting knowing several people that applied for this scheme. Many of them, I won't mention any names specifically, but had been making shorts already and thought they weren't going to make any more shorts, and they were definitely going to now move into features, and that was their goal. And then this scheme came up, and suddenly, because it's a significant amount of money and it's a stepping stone as well, that was a reason to apply, which is quite interesting because there are some schools who thought, say, if you've got 50 grand, you could actually make a feature. Is that something? I mean, obviously not necessarily of this calibre, but if you have that amount of money and you want to make features, then get on with it and make the feature.
Is that?
It's
sort
of a question.
It's quite hard to make a feature for 50 grand. I don't
It is,
try.
yeah.
No, I know.
You have to be quite careful about that actually, because you're exposed. When you make a feature, you're exposed in a way you're not when you make a short film, and sometimes that if it doesn't come off at the feature level, it can hinder you as well as help you. So you have to, if you've got the right project, and occasionally it works. Like Weekend is a perfect example of a very small scale story which could be made at £150,000 or whatever it was, and work. Very few projects have worked at that level. So sometimes it's actually better to make it short.
Yeah, and I think, because we have got a sort of real range of genres. We've got a sci-fi film, and we've got comedies, and I think that it's quite hard with the sort of the micro budget features sort of seem to lend themselves to a particular style sometimes. So this is a way to showcase it. But I was at a meeting with one of the teams this morning, and they said to me, it's so much work. We're sort of just thinking about keeping the crew on for an extra 2 weeks and getting a feature out of them. But yeah, I mean, it's the workload and the stress and how much you have to put into it. It's not dissimilar.
Just there, yeah.
Hi, I was mostly interested in where next for the next round of funding, and if you will be considering animated films as shorts that might lead on, as a signature that then might lead on to a feature, or pilots for features.
Chris?
Yeah, well, obviously we're going to still keep investing in shorts, but as I said earlier, not quite in the way that the scheme works. So that will, and keep an eye on the website. There'll be news on that sort of after April. Very much keen to encourage animation, and definitely want to get a similar short scheme to this one for animation going this year. Probably for fewer films. I think we'd be able to make 4 or 5 films. But again, keep an eye on the website, because we will definitely have that up and running at some point.
Can we go right at the back? Please.
This guy in the shirt.
Right at the back, next to the wall. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. One of the things that interests me about what you're saying about this scheme in particular is that it was the body of films that were sort of came with this particular script as well that were almost as important, the body of work behind it. And I think the Channel 4 Coming Up scheme as well kind of expects to see, doesn't it, which is run by Lighthouse, it expects to see a certain number of shorts like under your belt. So, I mean, if you are at entry level, basically, you're making your first short, is really public funding out of the question? Do you have to hit a certain bar in terms of quality or numbers of shorts before you even bother?
There isn't much public funding at entry level. There's the London Boroughs scheme, which Film London run with the London Boroughs. We get, £2.5, £3 grand, which actually is a really significant amount of money, and you can do a lot with it. And that scheme's great. A lot of great stuff comes out of that. So, but that's sort of the only one at the moment.
Anywhere in the country?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
DigiCult.
Oh, in Scotland, Scotland are just doing you're quite right. They just announced a sort of scheme for relatively low budget, 15 to 20 grand a month. So if you're a Scottish filmmaker, you have a chance to apply there. But actually, at the moment, there aren't many other opportunities.
Presumably, you could sort of try and team up with somebody who's maybe a Scottish producer for that.
I think I'll be looking
Worth
at
checking
Scottish
out.
filmmakers probably, because it's quite limited.
Yeah.
They haven't done
Yeah.
shorts for a while. I mean, I think that there will more things will happen this year. Creative England will be looking at that area. Things may well open up, and it won't just be the big fun.
Where is the mic? Sorry. Yeah, just in front of you.
Thanks. Also, like Karina, I've sort of worked in entertainment, factual television, and there's a wonderful term of being a self-shooter in television, where basically you're asked to do everything yourself. And with that experience, you can also understand how much you can do for a certain amount of money. How are you planning on monitoring how much money you give someone, and making sure that they're not just going to take a payday and the producer's going to take 700 quid a day of that for himself as his living cost and make the film for peanuts? How do you monitor how the film's made? Also, I met with someone who was making a feature at the end of last year, and I said, why are all your staff being paid so much when you're trying to make a low-budget feature? And it just sounded they were all sort of blagging a payday. And so how are you going to monitor the money spent on the screen, essentially? Obviously, people obviously need to be paid, and it's their living. But how do you monitor that the money is spent correctly?
I guess that's for Nikki.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, sort of we have selected teams, and especially, I guess, in terms of what you're asking, it's producers that we feel, I mean, there's an element of trust there, apart from kind of the track record and what they're kind of showing us in terms of the budget and their sort of their plans of how they're going to proceed. So, there's sort of been close scrutiny in the selection stage, and then, we keep I actually keep a very close eye on all the producers and what they're doing and how they're spending the money, and while I'm kind of not there sort of counting the pennies on a daily basis, I mean, they do have to kind of provide cost reports and evidence for how it's being spent, and they've had to sign up to a production finance agreement with the BFI, which is a legally binding contract that.
But even at this level, you know, there's not enough money. I mean, if you make 500 quid, you're doing really well. I mean, you know, that's probably going to go into it at the end. You know,
Yeah.
so,
It's
and
not
you're
a money making
going to be doing
venture.
like 2 months or 3 months work. I mean,
Well, I've been working on it since the summer.
there you go. See, I mean,
Yeah, and
you
I still
know,
haven't finished.
I mean, I think the sort of
Yeah.
the intentions of all the teams, and you know, their kind of passion and real hunger for this. I mean, there's no point in any of them kind of to go
I've
through
had
it
to
and
put
not
all my
have.
other work on hold to do it.
Yeah.
So it's quite an expensive thing to do.
Yeah. And also with that, are you abiding by film industry rates or television rates? Obviously the two fluctuate. The television industry works slightly different in terms of rates in comparison to the film industry. Are you abiding by a certain set of rules for
the actual guidelines, the minimum that can be paid is national minimum wage. So it's I mean, that's obviously not exactly in line with sort of BEC 2 or, you know, all the minimum film rates, but it's all kind of legal in terms of people being employed on that basis of national minimum wage.
But just to add to what you're saying as well, one of the interesting things for me has been, from coming from TV, has been learning to not try and do everything myself.
Yeah.
Because, and relinquishing control to other departments, understanding what those are, and really had to work with quite a big team. Because obviously if you want to get into features, it's not going to be like that.
Yeah. That's a heavenly experience that I'm waiting for.
There was somebody just in front. Jessica, yeah.
Hi. You mentioned that there will be shorts being done through some sort of talent organisation through Creative England, I think. I think that was mentioned earlier. Is that you, Chris?
Yeah.
It does. I know that everything seemed to be disproportionate a few years ago, that everything happened in London and the boroughs, the rest of the country with poor relations, but it begins to feel almost like the inverse now, in that, say for iFeatures, a lot of London filmmakers were having to make kind of strange relationships with producers they didn't know from the regions, sometimes marriages of convenience in order to get the application in, and the iFeature scheme almost encouraged that because people were doing it through the website. Will there be such a thing in London as a parallel talent tracking organisation in London, maybe through Film London? I mean, at the moment also, Film London, the microwave films are still going through, and I know that that has been a deal that was made in the past, but it's very, it's half the budget of the iFeature films at the moment. I know that they will have to come
Third
up
of the
with
budget.
Yes. So
no, listen, I hear what you're saying. I mean, well, two things. One, iFeatures was very specifically about getting regional films made. So it's absolutely in line with what Creative are there for. Further talent opportunities that will happen will be working with Creative England on in terms of the talent centres. They'll be open to everyone. I mean, they're open if you're from the Orkney Islands or from Hackney. It won't be about making it be regional. It just be slightly about devolving the decision-making process outside of London, so it makes the rest of the country feel slightly more included and less elitist. So it's just sort of just helps it on that for all of those people. Majority of them don't live in London. So I think that's part of the plan, but definitely it's not going to exclude anybody, and everybody's going to be able to apply in a way that they can apply to BFI now.
Any other questions? Yeah, just
Sure.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about the BFI production company support scheme that was announced yesterday, and if and how your plans for future production funding relate to that?
Well, the Vision Awards, which were announced yesterday, are a production company support scheme which are designed to give pretty established companies or companies with a track record, some kind of track record in feature production, development money, so that they can use it autonomously. They can invest in projects and maybe even in personnel and treatments or whatever material. So they've got real kind of creative autonomy to build their businesses. That's very much part of what our overall plans for the fund, which is we want companies who can make feature films, who've got really strong material that they can go out to the market with, and who can build a base. So that's what it's really sort of targeted at development activity solely. But what we'd hope is those companies could develop material that can come back into the fund looking for funds and make interesting feature films with some vision maybe. Yeah.
There was another hand. Oh yeah, just here. Sort of front.
I think specifically for this Shorts Film Fund, you mentioned having a track record, and I think, Nikki, you mentioned having 2 outstanding short films. And I was wondering specifically where, for you, maybe the emphasis lies, and what exactly the definition of an outstanding track record is. Mm-hmm. For you, is it the quality of the creative side and the story of previous projects, or the success of distribution, or the use of money, maybe? I was just wondering if you can maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually two previous short films. It was 2 previous pieces of work, because we were open to applications from commercials, directors, theatre, writer, directors, and sort of talent from different disciplines. So really, in terms of the outstanding, there isn't a definition, because obviously we were looking at commercials, we were looking at music videos, we looked at a lot of short films, and we looked at some theatre reviews, and sort of we had to kind of do specific research in that department. And I think it was, all of the work kind of had to, they were judged on their creative merit, basically. And of course, sort of a piece of work that's won lots of awards, or been in selected in competition in high-profile festivals. I mean, that's kind of an easy way to sort of define it. But we looked at everything. So we were quite open to seeing outstanding work that perhaps hadn't been recognised within the film industry, or even publicly necessarily. So.
It was somebody was just there at the back. Thanks.
Hi, just in relation to the Vision Awards, when you say it's a company's track record, for example, if you were a new company but you had brought in a producer with the appropriate credits, is that something you will look at, or is it the company specifically that you want to have a track record?
No, it is about the track records of the producers. So if a producer's made 2 feature films, but I started a new company, then that's okay.
Any other questions? Yeah, just there.
This question's for Karina. It's Karina, sorry, I can't speak. I don't so obviously, you were nominated for Care Would Be in 2007, if I remember correctly, which it was an amazing film, by the way. But I'd just like to know about the process of obviously being nominated and the reaction that happened at the time, and obviously between 2007 and till now in this exact scheme, what actually happened to you as obviously as a writer and a director.
It was great. It was about a nomination, and I got an agent for a start, and I suppose just started to take myself a bit more seriously as well, and the whole trajectory of moving into features. And then I think I made a coming up after that. Yeah, after that I did a coming up, and then had a baby. Well, it's been okay. And then have actually been doing quite a lot of writing, but nearly got a feature project off the ground, and that's taken up a really long time. So I started to feel quite rusty in terms of directing, which is why I really wanted to do this, and felt I was not quite focused. So wrote a feature and did another short really since then. but it opens a lot of doors to get a nomination of anything like that.
Had you worked with your producer before this? Yeah.
I had developed my feature script with her. Yeah, so we hadn't actually shot anything.
But
we
you had
spent
a
a lot of time
relationship
together. Yeah.
And I assume that helped.
Yeah. I mean, she's had to juggle it with other projects, so we've had to squeeze everything in, just the nature of how it's been done. But it's great that we've got that trust. Yeah.
Any other questions out there? If there's anything else you want to add on the panel about funding, I mean, this was quite specifically about this funding scheme, but if there are any, I mean, we could branch out into crowdfunding a little bit if anybody thinks it's useful, although there have been other sessions on that people might have attended. So,
well, I was just going to add that, you know, I know that Kickstarter is now active in the UK, and it's already a strong source of support for lots of different projects. So it's something to think about if you've got projects and you're out there looking to raise money. It definitely seems to work. So that's there are various other sort of fundraising things you go and so on. So there are a few things like that where presumably most of the people who are making films for the London Short Film Festival are getting their money. There's 1,200 films being made, so it must be coming from somewhere. Which is great.
And it does sort of seem that what you're saying is make sure that you have content to be able to show for next time the scheme runs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's really what you're assessing.
If it runs.
But presumably in any way, that in any form that it's going to run, the people are going to want to have a look at examples of work.
Well, also the competition is so fierce for these things. So there's so many applications. I mean, given that we set the bar really high on the scheme and we've got nearly 1,000 applications, so it just shows you. So, but having said that, if you can do something and get money from somewhere else and still manage to do something valuable, you can, you can kind of rise above everybody else. It's amazing. I always think, and maybe Matt knows this from development, but if there's a short film which, suddenly someone's talking about, it goes rounds really quickly, and suddenly thinking, then whoever it is holding meetings all over town. So they're incredibly useful things in terms of profiling your talent.
Yeah, absolutely. It can. I was going to say, it can launch a career. It can launch a career. It's great to have ideas. It's great to have sample scripts, but really to have a film that you can show. That's the most visceral. That's the most impactful thing that you can have. And these things, when they work, they really connect. So.
And the only other thing I was just going to add on sort of other funding is just sort of branded content funding, because there's a lot more of that happening now in sort of competitions, and that sort of Mo Film is a website, and I know that Bombay Sapphire and Soho House recently did a short film competition, and Collaborate, which ran again in the autumn. So
I think Mulberry as well paid for 2 or 3 short films.
That was in Style.
Yeah.
Paid for 7 short films last year. And I mean, I think all of these things, they have different sort of eligibility criteria and different things that they're looking for, but they're absolutely worth keeping an eye out for those things when they pop up, because it's a good source.
And the In-Style thing felt quite unique because they weren't asking you to place that product.
Yeah.
It wasn't about creating content that sold sold whatever they had to sell. It was about supporting talented people, helping them make films, and actually the association of how strong those films were then reflected well on the company. So it was a quite nice way of doing it without sort of selling out, I guess.
Okay, we've got a last question here from Mike, who's still just here, yeah.
Hello, yes. Did I gather from what you just said that this scheme will not be repeated then? You don't have an ongoing short film programme in place?
This particular scheme won't run again. We will still invest in short films this year, but we'll do it slightly differently. But we'll still be putting, hopefully up to £1 million into short films.
And just remind us when you think that will be announced.
We're aiming for April. These things take Fingers crossed.
By the summer.
The summer. Yeah. Sometime this year. Sooner rather than later.
Okay, any very final questions? Great, well please join me in thanking Matt, Nikki, Karina and Chris.